You know that chocolate bar, right? That simple, delicious treat we all love? Well, what if I told you that inside that wrapper, there's this incredible story, a story of biology, ancient history, and some seriously cool innovation. So let's unwrap it, shall we?
So, what does it really take to make this simple treat? You might think, oh, it's easy. You just melt some beans, throw in some sugar, and you're good to go. But nope. The real story is way more complicated, and it involves a cast of characters you would never ever guess.
Get this, it all comes down to a tiny insect. An insect so small, it basically holds the entire $100 billion chocolate industry on its back. Then, there's this microscopic battle that literally creates the flavor we love. And finally, a huge environmental problem that's actually forcing us to get really creative.
All right, first things first. Our journey doesn't start with a bean. No, it starts with the fruit it comes from, the cacao pod, also known as a mazorca. And it's a weird-looking thing. I mean, it's this colorful fruit that grows right off the trunk of the Theobroma cacao tree. And that name, it literally translates to food of the gods. How cool is that?
So this pod is basically a natural fortress. It's got these tough outer layers, the exocarp, mesocarp, and endocarp that act like armor. But the real treasure is on the inside. That's where you find the two key players for our story. The cacao seeds, which, we call beans, and this white kind of gooey pulp that's wrapped all around them. That pulp is called mucilage.
Now, for a super long time, people just thought of this pulp, this baba, as, well, just part of the process. But it turns out we were totally missing out. It's now being called a hidden superfruit. Seriously. It tastes like a mix of lychee and pineapple. And get this, it has 3 times the antioxidant power of pomegranate juice. So this stuff isn't just some byproduct, it's the absolute critical fuel for creating chocolate flavor.
Okay, so before you can even get a pod, a flower has to be pollinated. And this is where our first and maybe most surprising hero enters the picture. The entire, and I mean entire, global supply of chocolate depends on one tiny, unsung hero.
Let me introduce you to the chocolate midge. This little guy is only 1 to 3 millimeters long. That's like the size of a pinhead. And it's the only creature on Earth small and clever enough to navigate the super intricate cacao flower to pollinate it. Let me put it this way. No midge, no chocolate, end of story. It's really that simple.
And this just shows you how fragile this whole system is. Because honestly, the midge isn't all that great at its job. The success rate is, well, it's shockingly low. On some big plantations, only about three out of every 1,000 flowers actually turn into a cacao pod. That's insane.
The numbers are just staggering. To fertilize one single flower, you need about 250 grains of pollen. But a midge, it can only carry about 30 at a time. So do the math. A flower needs a whole bunch of different midges to visit it, all within its tiny 24-hour lifespan, just to make one pod. It is, without a doubt, a biological miracle every single time it works.
Okay, so once those precious pods are harvested, the real magic starts, and that magic is fermentation. But here's the twist. The beans themselves, they don't actually ferment. Nope. Instead, this whole universe of microbes throws a party and feasts on that sweet, fruity pulp. And that feast sets off a chemical chain reaction that completely changes the bitter seeds inside.
It all goes down in 2 main phases. First up, you have the anaerobic phase. That means no oxygen. Yeasts get to work on the pulp sugars and turn them into ethanol, kind of like making wine. Then, the farmers come along, they turn the pile, and that introduces air. This kicks off phase 2, the aerobic phase. A whole new crew of microbes, these acetic acid bacteria. They take over, eat up all that ethanol, and create acetic acid.
And this second part is where things get, well, hot. It's an exothermic reaction, which means it generates a ton of heat. The temperature inside that pile of beans skyrockets to 50 degrees Celsius. That's 122 Fahrenheit. This heat is the absolute game changer. It's what kills the little embryo inside the seed, which then breaks down its cell walls. All these different compounds start mixing together for the very first time, and boom, you've just created the building blocks of chocolate flavor.
The before and after here is just mind-blowing. A raw cacao bean is purple, it's super bitter, and it tastes nothing, and I mean nothing, like chocolate. But after fermentation, its bitterness drops by as much as 70%. It turns that beautiful brown color we all recognize, and most importantly, it now has all those crucial flavor precursors just waiting to be woken up during the roasting process.
So now we get to the invention of modern chocolate.
Because even after all that work, the fermentation, the roasting, for thousands of years, people only used these beans to make a kind of gritty, bitter drink. That silky, smooth, melts-in-your-mouth chocolate bar we know and love, that's actually a pretty recent invention, all thanks to the Industrial Revolution.
I mean, think about it. People have been consuming cacao for almost 4,000 years. The Aztecs thought it was so valuable they actually used the beans as money. But the massive leap forward, the thing that gave us modern chocolate, didn't happen until 1879. And it was all because of a Swiss inventor you've probably heard of, Rudolf Lindt.
Yeah, the story is pretty legendary. Apparently, Lindt accidentally left one of his chocolate stirring machines running all weekend. When he came back on Monday, he expected a mess. But instead, that coarse, gritty chocolate paste had become, well, miraculously velvety and smooth. A lot of the bitterness was gone. And right there, in that happy accident, the modern chocolate bar was born.
And that happy accident became a world-changing process called conching. What it does is it constantly stirs and grinds the chocolate for hours, sometimes even for days. This grinds the particles down so small, below 30 microns, that your tongue literally can't feel them anymore. At the same time, any leftover bitter acids from fermentation just evaporate away. And that is how you get that signature, luxurious, melt-in-your-mouth feeling.
But, and there's always a but, isn't there? There's a hidden, darker side to this delicious story. The old-school way of making chocolate, the one that only cares about the bean, creates a huge environmental problem. And it's a problem that threatens the entire system we've just been talking about. Just look at this ratio. It's wild. For every single cacao pod that gets harvested, only about 30% of it, just the beans and the pulp, actually gets used for chocolate. What happens to the other 70%? The husk, the shell, it just gets thrown away. 70%.
And that 70% adds up. We're talking about 700,000 tons of waste every single year. The runoff from fermentation, the sweat-ins, they pollute local streams and create these oxygen-starved dead zones where nothing can live. Plus, as our demand for chocolate goes up, more forests are cleared for plantations. And what lives in those forests? Our hero, the chocolate midge. We're destroying the home of the one creature we absolutely need.
Okay, but this is where the story gets really hopeful. There's a new generation of innovators out there who are looking at that 70% and they're not seeing waste. They're seeing a massive opportunity. They're creating what's called a circular economy for cacao, turning waste into a total win-win.
And the solutions are just brilliant. That hidden superfruit pulp, it's now being turned into things like fresh juices and vitamin shots. Or it's dried and used as a natural sweetener, so you can have chocolate that's sweetened only with the cacao fruit itself. And the husks? They're being converted into nutrient-rich compost and biochar to make the soil healthier for the next crop of trees. It's genius.
And look, this isn't just a win for the environment. It's a huge win for people, too. By selling the pulp and the husks, the stuff they used to throw away, the small farmers who are the backbone of this whole industry can boost their income by almost 40%. That is a massive deal. It gives them real economic stability in a market that's famous for being totally unpredictable.
So that brings us back to where we started, with a simple treat that, as you now know, holds an incredibly complex world inside. The next time you have a piece of chocolate, maybe you'll think about that tiny midge or that crazy microbial battle, and maybe you'll think about the amazing potential hidden in that 70% we used to just throw away. Which leaves us with a pretty big question, right? Will the future of chocolate depend not on the bean, but on everything we used to leave behind?